Hi everyone. In this lesson we're going to sketch out ideas for a standing sign, a little desk nameplate. And so we're going to design something that will end up standing upright, and it'll need a little bit of a foot at the back so that it will not fall over. But we don't want to print it standing upright, as we're planning on having some text in there. And all of the holes are going to have to be built out full of supports if we print it standing upright. So we're going to want to design our shape to lie down flat with the stand on the back sticking straight up, and then we'll be able to print our shape no matter what kind of holes are in it, straight up and down without any supports. So in the next lesson we will take a look at how I designed and added some details to this little standing nameplate. Hi everyone. In this lesson we are going to design a standing nameplate, and we'll try adding some crazy details to it a bit later. So first, I want to set up how we're going to make this frame that we can fit our words in, and I want to design it so that we will print it face down and have our stand sticking up out of the back, allowing us to print it without any supports. Since it's hard to design things while rotating them, I'm going to design the actual shape lying flat, and then we'll move it into print position when we're ready. So I'll start with a box, and we'll make this 100 by 40. So I will select my corner handle here, and then just click on the measurements, and we can change them to 100, hit tab, and change this one to 40. So now I have a size for my frame, and I don't want it to be nearly that thick, so let's make this thing very thin. I'll go down to 6 millimeters again. Now we want to cut the inside out of this to make the actual frame. And we only really want this frame to be about 2 millimeters thick all the way around. It's just enough that it won't be bending or flexible, and we'll be able to attach all of the letters to it. So let's zoom in a bit here, and we're going to click on Duplicate and Repeat. It's going to duplicate this box in the exact same position. We'll take our new box and turn it into a hole, so we can see that it perfectly overlays our first box. And we're going to change our size by just clicking on the corner here and typing this in, and I want 2 millimeters on each side, so that means I got to subtract 4 from each of my numbers. So we're going to click on 100, change it to 96, I'll hit tab, and this one's going to be 36. So now I have enough space, but this hole would cut off only one side of my box instead of making it a frame. So we're going to click and drag, and as long as this box touches both of our shapes, it'll select both of them. Now you can see that we have two shapes selected. And I'm going to go up here to the Align tool, and let's click on Center and Center. So now our hole is exactly in the center, and there'll be 2 millimeters on either side of it. Since I already have these two selected, I'll just click on Group, and now we have our frame. There are many ways to do the same thing in TinkerCAD, and you could make this frame by creating 4 2 millimeter wide boxes and arranging them in the shape of a frame and then grouping them all together. But this method only requires 2 objects, so it's a little bit more efficient. Now I'm going to put some text in there. So let's scroll down to our text shape, drag that in there. The text shape has inside of its shape controls an actual text box here for us to type in. So I'm just going to add my name there. And let's go ahead, capitalize it. Oop. There we go. And we can see that all the letters, even though they're part of one object, are separated. So if I was to print this now, they would fall apart. So we want them to touch the frame at least one place. Right now, the way that this font is, I'm actually unable to get everything to touch without sticking the J out of the side. So let's see if we can change that. I'm going to change this to the Sans font. There we go, Sans Mono. This way it doesn't go down below. So I can use these letters and I can stick them to the bottom of my frame. Now if I want them to touch the top, I can easily make them exactly the right size. Since I know the measurements of this, I can just click on this and change the height of this to 40. Let's select these guys and use the Align tool to line them up in the center. Now I know that my J is touching the top and the bottom. And in this case, I want to go here and change the height. Let's click off and click on again, change the height to 6. Because the front face of my design has to be perfectly flat and at the same level, since I'm going to be flipping this over in order to print it. Now we can see that our letters are only touching one side of the frame, but that's enough to attach them since they don't have any separate parts. If I were to make this a lowercase j, ooh, that's interesting. We'll have some trouble with that font. But instead, if I want them all to touch both sides, I can use capital letters. And if I wanted to design this so that they only touch the top, I could also do that, because even though they only touch one side of the frame, they'll still be connected, and once we stand this up, the letters will just be floating there above the bottom. We could also add some other details to this as long as they stay at the 6mm height so that we can flip them over. For now, I'm going to make this with hanging letters. And so we're going to select the frame and the name and group it together. Now that we have a single solid piece, we are ready to add the stand to the back. Clearly, if we add something to the back now, it'll be underneath the ground, and that will not print correctly. So we're going to flip our entire project over by using the rotate tool. If you were to use the mirror tool to flip it, you're going to change the orientation of the letters, and it's just going to look weird. So let's use the rotate tool and go all the way around to 180 degrees. With the rotate tool, as long as you stay inside the circle, it will snap to these increments, and if you go outside, you're going to move it 1 degree at a time, which is dangerous because it's hard to get back to 0 if you've moved it a strange number of degrees. So let's flip it 180. Now we can see that our shape is going to be face down, and it's going to be completely flat with the floor. And since this is our bottom, we want to stand it up, I will go back up here and grab a box. And we know that our frame is 2mm thick, so I'll take my measurements and change this to a 2. And now we have a 2 mm thick stand that sticks out the back side. This will give the bottom of our design enough surface area that we can stand it up on our desk and it won't be easy to tip over. So we'll select the both of these and group everything together. Now we'll be ready to print a simple nameplate. And if we want to add some more detail to it, we can add shapes that go around the sides as long as the front is perfectly flat. Since we're going to be printing this face down, that's the only thing that needs to remain the same. We could add any number of shapes. Now, these flames on here were built out of quite a few shapes. Let's unhide these things, and we can see some other examples of things you could do with this technique. Our shape does not have to be a name or a frame. I've made these flat jack-o'-lanterns here, which you would print on their face as well, with stands behind them, and then they can stand up. As far as our design for the flames goes, started by creating this, which is a scribble. So using the scribble tool, you can draw shapes, but they tend to be sort of blobby. It's hard to get something that is very precise out of a scribble. So let's go back here. You can see the scribble tool is a shape just like any others. If you were to drag it out, you would get a new work plane to scribble on. And then whatever you draw is going to be created as a solid shape. So using the scribble tool, I drew a doodle for the shape that I wanted the fire to be. And then placing it underneath my frame here, I changed the solid color to a transparent color so that I could see through it, and then clicked on this lock here. So now the doodle of the flames cannot move, and it cannot be grouped or have its size changed. So with this behind to guide me, and let's put this on flat view, I was able to position shapes to make a much nicer version of the flames. These flames, you can see if I ungroup them, are simply made out of cylinders. So by stacking up a bunch of cylinders, cutting out the middle here in order to not block off the name, and cutting other cylinders out of my cylinders, I created this shape similar to the doodle I did of the fire. Hope you have fun with that technique and try making some interesting standing signs. Next time, we'll set this one up to print. We're going to set up our name frame with the flames here to print. And I'm going to show you how changing our orientation is going to save us a lot of time and plastic. So without changing anything about this standing up sign, I'm just going to click on Export, and we'll export the selected shape so we don't get everything in my examples here. It's an STL file. So let's click on our slicer, Cura, and open up our name frame STL. And now we have it in its standing position. We can see from the underside that the bottom is going to be flat on the surface, highlighted in blue, and all of the underside faces are highlighted in red as areas that are going to require support. So we can already see that this is going to get filled in with support. But let's take a look at how this would end up printing. So I'm going to slice this right now, and it says it'll take 3 hours and 17 minutes. And in our preview, you can see that all of this area here is going to be filled in with this support structure. Now, supports are going to be little towers that are built with a small gap between them and the layer above them, so that any sagging from the bridge above them will rest on them without sticking to them too much. If I scroll down here, you can see that while our parts are double walled and have more material inside of them, our supports just have a simple zigzag and they take up less material, but still are a lot of stuff to knock out of our part just to get this printed. Now, since we have designed it with a perfectly flat front face, we're going to be able to print this without supports at all. So let's go back to prepare. We'll select our object here and we'll go into rotate. Now I'm going to select a face to align with the build plate. I know that I can rotate this 90 degrees and have it down on the ground, but even easier, I can click on this and select the front face of my object. Come on now. There we go. Now that the front has been lined up to attach to the floor, we can see that we have blue all along the front. It's going to be attached to the ground and no red to be seen anywhere. So even if we tell it to generate supports, when we slice, we are going to see no supports whatsoever. It's going to take an hour and 15 minutes less, so only 2 hours. And if we look at our preview, we are going to be using a lot less plastic since we don't have to build any of these support columns on the inside. All right, now that it's ready to print, we can save to file and upload it.